Hey girl, hey. My name is Danielle Taylor, and I am so excited to be here with you today. I am the CEO of Strategic Disruption Consulting. We are a nonprofit consulting agency that specializes in helping Black-led and Black benefiting nonprofit organizations get the financial and structural support that they need to thrive. I want to say a special thank you to the organizers of the Black Girls Dream Conference. This was no small feat. Thank you so much for bringing us together to learn from one another, to celebrate each other, and to encourage each other to continue fighting the good fight. All right, friends, let's get started. Today, I have the opportunity to teach you about how to write a winning grant application. Okay, we're not just talking about some grant application that you found online and you went ahead and put some words together and quickly hit submit and hope for the best. Okay, what I want you to know how to do is how to research, how to write a compelling narrative, and how to make sure that you are in good relationship with the foundation that you are applying to. All right, so let's dig in. Before you ever even start putting pen to paper, I need you to do a few things on the front end of the grant writing process. A lot of times we think that grant writing is just finding something on the internet and telling our story, writing that up in the grant application and clicking submit. But there are some really important things that you want to do on the front end that's going to maximize the potential for you to actually secure that grant. So before you get started, I want you to invest in researching local foundations, okay? The lowest hanging fruit are always closest to home. When you see those grant opportunities online for $100,000 here or $1 million there, you have to understand that those are incredibly competitive, okay? You're going to be up against major organizations with massive operating budgets who can really invest in a strong, compelling application. So you want to make sure that you are reducing the barriers to your success and go towards those organizations that are most likely to fund you. And the foundations that are within your region, let's just say they fund organizations within the metro Atlanta area or in the central Virginia area. They are so excited to invest in positive change in their own communities. So the chances of you winning that grant are going to be higher. So I'm going to encourage you before you even start doing any major grant application, ask yourself, is this a local opportunity that I am going to be able to stand out from the pack? Or am I going to be a small fish in a big pond and potentially, lose out on a lot of the energy and time that I've invested in the application that was way too competitive given the state of my current organization? The next thing I want you to do is to really research the organization that you are applying to. Now, I know that as nonprofits, people are emailing you grant opportunities all the time. They'll say, oh, yeah, you work with girls. Here's a great opportunity that does youth development. But does that actually align with your organization and the work that you do? So before you apply, take the time to study the foundation. Go to their website. You can even pull up their 990s online to understand who have they funded in the past, where have they been investing resources historically, as recently as just the previous fiscal year, right? Like really understand who they are, what they care about, and how what they say they care about translates to the type of organizations and programming that they fund. Okay, so on the next slide, I'm going to give you a little example. Now, you can do this research without paying for fancy tools, although there are some really helpful tools out there, like Instrumental, like GuideStar. And what you can do is type in the foundation that you're interested in applying to, and then go back and look at their history of giving. So I pulled this example for a particular foundation out of the Central Virginia area, and I just pulled a snapshot from the year 2022, who was funded, how much money did they receive, and for what type of programming. Now you can see with just a quick search on GuideStar, I was able to pull up the name of all of the recipient organizations that received money. So that tells me a clue right there. Okay, I know that they tend to fund organizations like this. Okay, I know where they're based. All of the organizations that they have funded have been in Richmond, Virginia, except for North Chesterfield, which is right outside of Virginia. Okay, I'm sorry, right outside of Richmond. I also see the primary subject. So it looks like there was a lot of resources invested in early childhood education. I see some mental health funding, family planning, and arts and culture. Okay, so that can give me an indication. Does my program align with the areas in which they have funded in the past? If so, that's a good sign for me, right? This might be something that I can apply for. And then in that last column, you'll see the grant amount. So how much money they gave. A lot of times foundations will actually post on their website, here are all of the organizations that we've given money to. These were the programs that we gave money to, and this was how much money we gave. Okay, that's really helpful for you because you don't want to submit an application for a $500,000 when you see historically the foundation has never given more than $100,000. Okay, and even with that, there were only two organizations that had a grant award for $100,000. Everyone else ranged between $25,000 and $40,000. So you want to make sure that you are studying this so that you're making an appropriate ask. You don't want to make an ask that will immediately get disregarded because you haven't really considered either their funding guidelines, which says maybe they say we only give awards up to, $75,000. Or for first-time applicants, we only issue grants for $75,000 or something like that. You just want to make sure that you are keeping up with the requirements that have been outlined by the donor. Even if it wasn't explicitly stated, you want to take a look at their historical trends so that you can make a well-informed ask. All right, the next thing that I want you to do, again, before you start putting pen to paper, is build relationships. No one likes a cold call, okay? So the same way you would try to talk to, if you were applying for a job, you would try to talk to someone on staff, get to know the company a little bit more. You want to do the same thing with a grant application, okay? Keep in mind that grants are not just a written process. The grant process is really rooted in relationships. There are real human beings behind that computer screen after you hit submit who are going to be reading through and processing your application. So take some time to get to know them. You may not always be successful, but what does it hurt for you to send an email introducing yourself and your nonprofit and making a request? Can I take you out for coffee or can we have a Zoom call just so that you can learn a little bit more about my organization? I can learn a little bit more about your foundation, and then we can decide together if it's a good idea for me to pursue funding from your foundation. Okay. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you are able to articulate how your work aligns with their mission. Okay. And this, I think, is where people run into trouble with their grant writing process. They just jump to the finish line instead of walking the reader through the process of how the work that is being done by your nonprofit aligns with the ultimate goal of the foundation. Okay, so here's an example that I have for you. On the left side of the screen, you'll see an example of what most or early inexperienced grant writers will try to do. They will see an organization that is interested in positive health outcomes. And they will say, oh, well, our work is around equitable access to education. That makes sense. It falls under the umbrella of positive health outcomes. And they will just talk about their work providing equitable access to education. That's setting you up for failure. Okay, you don't want to do that. take the time to walk the reader through how you are able to achieve positive health outcomes by starting with equitable access to information, to education. You could think about this along the lines of your theory of change. What is the chain of causation? How do you get from equitable access to education into positive health outcomes? So you can say that positive health outcomes is all encompassing. There are social determinants of health that maybe start with in the early stages of a child's life, access to a quality education, which will thereby improve their economic opportunities, which will lead to more social empowerment and social mobility, so that this person is able to have more positive health outcomes in their lives. Okay? So this is a really simple example, but sometimes you have to take a couple more steps to get the reader to understand how the unique work that you are doing is an important part of the broader work that is taking place to achieve that ultimate goal. All right. I know that was a lot of information, so I just want to give you a second to digest it. All right, now we are getting into the process of actually putting the pen to paper and writing the grant application. And my first bit of feedback for you here is to answer what is asked in the application. Now, I know y'all are probably looking at me crazy right now because this sounds super easy. If you are asked a question, you answer the question. But I gotta tell you, there are so many inexperienced grant writers. Hell, sometimes there are even experienced grant writers who will try to just paint the strongest picture of their organization in every single question, right? But then they end up missing what the question was asking. Okay, so a lot of times people who read the grant will skim through the answers and they still don't quite understand what the organization does, or they don't understand how it ties into the question that was asked. Okay, so something that I recommend everyone do, no matter if you're inexperienced, experienced, it doesn't matter. A good practice is to just go through and highlight or underline the operative word in each question to make sure that every sentence you write in your response is in service of what they are asking. Okay, so we're gonna do a little example together here. Here are 4 application questions from a real grant application that is around capacity building. Okay, all of us could use capacity building resources, but it can be a little tricky for us to talk about why we need it and what we would do with it in order to better serve our nonprofit and the communities that we work alongside. So here are a couple of questions here. I want you to take a moment and underline or highlight in your mind what are the operative words that I really need to focus on when I'm writing out my response. If you need to pause the video and give yourself a little more time, feel free to do so. But I'm going to go ahead and move on. Here are the operative words that I have highlighted, okay? Succinctly describe why there is a need, okay? They want to know why you need capacity building resources, okay? And then they ask you to list the activities that you will do. Okay, you say you need to do some capacity building. What are the activities you will do? Next, what is the impact that this capacity building will have on your organization, your constituents, and or the community served? So what is the impact? That is what they want to know. Okay. And then what are the indicators of success? Okay, if you do the capacity building work, how will you know that it has been successful? What are the indicators of success? I hope that was a helpful exercise for you to understand just how specific you need to get in responding to the questions that are being asked. All right, the next thing I need you to do is have all of your documents ready. You will find time and time again, grant applications are going to ask you for the exact same documents over and over and over. So you might as well just have them ready, store them in a folder on your computer, and you know that you are able to grab those documents and submit every single time. So usually what funders will ask for are your financial statements. Please make sure that they are up to date. If it is audited, that's fantastic. If it is not audited, make sure that you have an explanation as to why not. And this is simple. You can say, maybe given our size, we didn't find it to be a prudent use of resources to invest in a financial audit at this stage. Maybe based on our state regulations, we're not yet at an operating budget size that mandates an audit. It doesn't matter. You can explain it. You just want to have your explanation ready. You also want to make sure that you have each of the financial statements, okay? If you are not clear on what those statements are or how to read them, you want to do your due diligence, study the statements, make sure you're talking with your bookkeeper, your treasurer, your accountant, whomever is helping you with this process. Make sure that you have the most updated statements at least every quarter and be able to articulate what is going on. What do the financial statements tell you? What do they suggest about your cash flow? What do they suggest about your revenue streams? What do they suggest about the expenditures and your burn rate? Make sure that you have all those documents and explanations ready to go for every single application. The next thing you want to have, of course, is your operating budget. This is really important. Every grant application wants to see that big snapshot of your organization's financial state and plan for the year. But where a lot of organizations get caught up is that they sometimes don't have a program budget. Okay. And sometimes I get pushback. Why do I even need a program budget? We only do 2 programs. All the resources are kind of tied together. It's really important that you take the time to disentangle what does it take to implement one program versus another program. Even if you have, let's say, one staff person who provides support to 2 different programs. In the program budget, you want to show that 50% of this overall salary is going to program A, and the other 50% of the salary is going to program B. Because when you are writing a grant, you need to be very specific about why you need this money and how the money will be spent. Okay, so if you don't have your program budget teased out from your overall operating budget, it is critical that you go ahead and take that step now before you submit any more applications. All right. Next, we want to see at least 2 years worth of 990s. So even if your organization is, let's say, just 1 year old and you have just one copy of your 990, craft a memo that just quickly explains my organization achieved nonprofit status 1 year ago, so we only have 1 year's worth of 990s to submit. That way you at least have the documentation that you need to explain why the document is not there. And if you are older than a year old, make sure that each year you are storing regularly the copy of your 990. Now, I know sometimes the 990 is submitted a little late. We apply for an extension. Again, that's totally fine. Just make sure that it is documented so that when the foundation makes the request of you, you're able to give them some form of documentation that explains why what they have requested is not yet available. It's communicating to the funder that I have done my due diligence, okay? I have taken the time to really know what is required of me to remain in compliance and in good standing as a nonprofit organization, and here is my evidence of such. All right. The next thing you want to have is a list of your board of directors, okay? So we don't just want a list of names. We want to know what are their titles. So what is their position on the board? Are they an officer? Are they the president? Are they the treasurer, the secretary, a general officer? What is their professional affiliation? Okay, what do they do in their 9 to 5 outside of volunteering on your board? And this just helps get a sense of do you have the right oversight and governance for your organization? What I didn't list here is that oftentimes it's helpful for you to also have the list and short professional bio of each of your staff members. Okay. A lot of times foundations want to know, do you have the right expertise to execute the type of work that you're saying you're going to do? Okay, so this is not the time to be humble. We want you to just go out there and straight up brag on your team. Let them know who you are, what experience you have, and a short and concise staff profile. All right, so now we're getting into, the actual writing of the application. I need you to really work on getting clear on the problem you're trying to solve. Okay. I see, especially a lot of early stage nonprofit leaders, maybe they felt like, well, I'm from this community and I made it out. I managed to be successful. And so I just want to help the people who are coming up behind me. And that's nice, it's well intentioned. But you really want to ground your work in evidence of what the community actually needs. Okay. I remember learning this lesson the hard way. Early in my career, I served as an educator with Teach for America. And I thought, man, I'm from some really underfunded, low performing schools, but I was able to graduate on time. I went to college. Like, I know I'm going to go into the classroom and I'm going to be able to connect with these kids. And when I got into the classroom, those kids didn't care anything about who I was, where I was from, and what I experienced, right? They were living a very different reality than the one that I experienced growing up. And I had to take the time to understand them, right? I had to know who they were and what they were experiencing in their communities at this stage in their lives so that I could best connect with and address their specific needs. Similarly, you can't do the nonprofit work that you're doing because you think that there is a problem, right? You need evidence to back that up. You have to be in relationship with your community and walk alongside them and gather evidence that suggests this is a clear problem and it is important to my community that we address the problem in this specific way. Now, you can articulate the problem in a couple of different ways. You can use your own original research from your journey alongside the community. You can say, based on our 5 years of surveying and conducting programming and interviewing our constituency, we have learned that they continue to face this challenge. And before we can get to, addressing positive health outcomes, we first have to start with, let's just say, education. Okay. I'm just giving you an example. Your original research is good and valid. It just needs to be documented and explained, articulated in the grant application. But if you don't have the bandwidth to do a lot of surveys or focus groups or what have you, that's okay. Sometimes you can draw from data that already exists in the community. All right. You can look at government data. Maybe the schools have published data on graduation rates. Maybe there is local city data on poverty rates. Maybe there is another civil society organization has data on teenage pregnancies or gun violence. Whatever the issue is that you're working on, there is data out there that exists to substantiate that, to highlight that. And so you just want to take the time to pull that research together and then reference it in your grant application so that you can demonstrate we have done our due diligence. We know that there is a problem. Sometimes we know because we're a part of the community and we too are experiencing the problem, but we want to be able to just draw from more than our personal anecdotes. We want to be able to draw from a broader body of research and data. Okay, this is probably one of the next biggest areas that I often see organizations struggle with. especially when you are a grassroots organization that is really just on the move. You are on the go. There is an immediate problem, and you are immediately showing up to provide a resolution or intervention. But it's really important that we take a step back and we really ask ourselves, how do we know that the work that we're doing is having an impact? And particularly, how do we know that the work that we're doing is having the impact that we say it's going to have? If we say that as a result of our programs, girls are going to be able to graduate high school at a higher rate than they did in years past, well, how do you know that? Okay. And I think where people get stuck is there's confusion around the difference between an output and an outcome. Okay. So, what I see sometimes in failed grant applications is that the writer will say, well, I know that this program will be successful if I successfully complete 10 trainings and we successfully register 10 mentors and we conduct 3 community sessions. Okay. What's the problem with what I just said? Those are all activities. So those are things that you can check the box and say, yes, I did this activity. But does that tell me whether or not there was a change in the mindset or the behavior or the approach to the problem that's going on in the community? So the output is the activity, what you are doing. The outcome is the change in behavior, the change in statistics, the change in how people think and talk about the issue. Okay, it's the social change that you're able to see as a result of your work. So when you think about the impact, you have to say, well, how do I know that there was an increase in self-confidence among my program participants? Are they saying things differently? Are they behaving a little differently? Maybe there are, because of our mentoring program, we're seeing that there are less incidents of fights in schools where we work. And so to us, that is an indicator that we have achieved the outcome that we desire. Okay? So you want to make sure that you are including outcome indicator, the data that reveals the changes in behaviors or mindsets, and you want to talk about the tools that you're using to collect that data. So maybe you do a survey, maybe you do a focus group, maybe you have an outside evaluator. I know a lot of organizations are doing a great job with partnering with either independent research institutions or with local universities so that professional researchers can come in and understand how the impact can be measured and actually do the measurement. I know this is a pretty intense section and it really warrants its own training. But for the purposes of today's session, I'm providing just a high-level overview. But if you would like more information on this specifically, I want to encourage you to visit our website, schedule a consultation. I would love to dig into this a little bit more with you. All right, friends, that was so much information. And I want to just say that this is only, the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, I'm not with you in person to be able to answer some of your live questions, but I do want to encourage you to scan the QR code on the screen or visit our website or our social profiles or shoot us an email. Let us know how we can be of support to you. Because at Strategic Disruption, we consider ourselves to be far more than business leaders. We are movement leaders, working to partner with Black-led and Black-benefiting organizations to ensure that you have the resources and the tools that you need to successfully implement and sustain your work. Again, my name is Danielle Taylor. It has been such a pleasure to connect with you. Please reach out if you have more thoughts or would like to talk further. Take care, and I hope you enjoy the conference.